Manchester. Welcome to Ward 13. You may notice that neither one of us is John Hopwood. I'm Connie Van Houten. I'm sitting in tonight for John Hopwood. Some of you may know me from local politics. I've been around a bit. I have been on the school board, and I am currently running for state rep as an incumbent from District 45, which is wards 10, 11, and 12. I'd like to introduce my co-host, though actually I'll let her introduce herself. Heidi Hamer, please.
I'm Heidi Hamer, and I'm a Ward 10 resident, and I am also the ward clerk at Ward 10, and I am also running for state rep in Ward 10, District 17 as for a state rep. And we have Garth with us today, and excited.
We actually have a West Side group here. We're
I know. Well, I'm a newbie to the West Side,
Yes.
but yes, been there a year.
And I'm an oldie to the West Side, but I perhaps shouldn't use that.
Well, my family, look, the Corriveau's generations ago were on the West Side. And I'm sure there still are some, in addition to my clan. But.
And my maiden name is LaFawn, so I go way back into the
Yes.
French-Canadian roots on top of all
Yep.
this. Garth, I want to welcome you. Thank you for
thank you
being
for
here.
having me. Thank
I know
you.
that you've been on camera most of the day today, and so we
Well,
appreciate your staying with us and
I
continuing.
appreciate being here. Thank you.
We have a great venue, I think, for us to talk about a lot of things that are going on. As evidenced here, New Hampshire is the state in which your neighbor could be running.
Yeah.
Your neighbor could be
Oh,
helping
definitely.
to make the laws.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's really good for us to have that opportunity to get to know people one-on-one.
Yeah.
So I thank John Hopwood for giving us this time on Ward 13 to do this.
Absolutely.
And I thank you and Heidi both for being here. We're going to kind of go back and forth on some
Please,
questions here because
absolutely.
there's so much we want to know about you.
All right.
And I'd just like to start with the first one. Who are you?
Let's see. Well, my name's Garth Corriveau. I am a husband. I'm a father of 3 boys, ages 4, 2, and 2 months old.
You should give the boys' names in case they're still up watching,
my
right?
boys.
Shout
Heath,
out.
Yep, Heath, who is 4, Bo, who is 2, and Quinn, who is 2 months, or almost 2 months old, 8 weeks old, to be precise.
Garth, I fixed the camera so you can now stare at America.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. My 3 sons.
Excellent.
I represented. I work as a small business attorney in the city at Mesmer and DeLoe, a few blocks from here. I also teach at mostly business law at Southern New Hampshire University. Probably, if anyone has heard of me, for the most likely reason is I served 6 years as a Manchester alderman. I represented the east side of Manchester, Ward 6, for 6 years. Loved it. Our brood outgrew our little house, and so I've moved from the east side to the west side now in Ward 12. But so I served 6 years, alongside a lot of good aldermen at that time. Joyce Craig being one. We were elected at the same time, and it was a fascinating experience in that I really got into politics with the Obama campaign. I'd always been interested in politics. My first job out of college, I worked as an organizer for Gene Shaheen, and then in law school, helped pay my own freight through student loans, and I worked as an organizer for Planned Parenthood then. Then after law school, really kind of was very disenchanted with politics, and then this young guy with a funny name ran for office, and I was inspired, and that got me in, and I became president of the Young Democrats and got a lot of young people into politics in 2008, which was a great experience. The following year, I really wanted to do something on the local level. I just didn't know what, and all of a sudden, longtime Republican Alderman Real Pinard retired, and I said to myself, wow, this is a time in my life, some young single guy with, just a job, I can do this, and worked very hard, and met a lot of people, knocked a lot of doors, and what do you know, all of a sudden I was the alderman for Ward 6, and I was reelected twice before I had to move, but it was a great experience. I think the big thing I really learned was that government really works when people just come together to work collaboratively, just work on issues. And for so much of my experience on the Board of Aldermen, that was really hard to do. Not necessarily with other aldermen, but after a little while, it became difficult for people like me or now Mayor Craig to try to find common ground with Ted Gassis at the time. We just had really different priorities. I think for a lot of us, to serve in local government means, to do everything you can to strengthen public safety, to invest in education, to make the community just a better, more empathetic, inclusive, welcoming community. And for so many reasons, we just were seeing the opposite of that happen. We had to just fight, fight hard to just keep things from getting worse. And that was, that was tough. That was a learning experience that, I now look at, Mayor Craig and what's going on, and I say to myself, wow, the opportunity now to actually do things in Manchester is great. But what ended up happening was Chris Pappas, who's our current executive counselor, is running for Congress. And kind of early this year, I started getting some phone calls from people saying, you've been out of City Hall a couple of years, and I think it's time you start thinking about something, the executive council. And talked about it with Kate, talked about it with my colleagues at Mesmer and DeLoe, and then what really, I think, cemented the notion that I felt compelled, that I almost felt like I didn't have a choice except to try, was at the time I was really making up my mind. SB 193 was the big political issue at the State House, which
Absolutely.
I know you championed
Absolutely.
the fight against that. But for those of you who don't know, SB 193 was Frank Edelbluth's voucherization scheme, whereby money would be taken out of public schools and provided as tax subsidies for people who wish to send their kids to parochial or private schools or homeschools, but not public schools. Now, to me, as an alderman, one of my favorite things to do was to go into city schools. It's great.
Do you know how much I can relate to what you're saying? 'Cause
Yeah.
my school board experience was parallel to your aldermanic
Yeah.
experience. And the roadblocks that I saw and the things
Yeah.
that we saw with SB 193, which is dastardly,
Yeah.
were well worth considering. You said a great many things that I think are fantastic,
Yeah.
but let me let you finish up on SB 193.
Sure, yeah. So in any case, SB 193 was championed by the new Commissioner of Education, Frank Edelbluth. Now, Frank Edelbluth, for those of you who may not know him, he is not what I guess would even remotely be called an expert on public education. He's never worked in public education at any level, teaching, administering, anything. Has no degrees in education whatsoever. And in fact, homeschooled his 7 children. This is someone who's pretty much the antithesis. His biography is pretty much the antithesis of public education. As someone who's loved going into Manchester schools and seeing these kids, facing these daily, challenges I, can't imagine growing up with, but that was their opportunity, that school day to move forward. To me, to take away from those kids, to take away from those most in need, so that people with means could have more, that they could have a tax break. To me, that is against everything I stand for. And Frank Edelbluth, by the way, the last thing to say is he was approved on a 3-2 vote. 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Now, traditionally on the executive council, someone who had no experience whatsoever in something, particularly a major state agency like the Department of Education, would never have even been considered. But he was rammed through by Governor Sununu and 3 Republicans. And we saw the consequences of coming very, very close to taking a battle axe to public education in this state.
We actually voted 4 times against it. We had to
Right.
go that often against it to
Right.
get it to lie down and stay down.
Right. But had there been no right-wing ideologue as Commissioner of Education, I sometimes I go around to events and I say, he's Betsy DeVos without the high heels, But Frank Edelbluth is not a defender, a proponent, an advocate for public education. He's looking to dismantle public education. Education is your opportunity. I would not be I would not be who I am without the fact that I was blessed to have great teachers, And everyone deserves that opportunity for a great public education. And when I thought about, hey, look, these 3 people made that decision to make him Commissioner of Education. 3 people made that decision. And I said to myself, you know what? I need to try. I need to just try to campaign and try to get elected to the Executive Council, because I think Chris Pappas was, of course, on the right side of this issue, but
And Andy Belinsky was also supportive,
and Andy
right?
Belinsky, exactly. So
Right.
so if we can, if knock on wood, if I can get elected and a good Democrat, whether it's Deb Pignatelli or Joe Pace or Mike Rines, any of them can get any one of them can get elected too. I really think we can do much, much more to provide real oversight and accountability in state government so that we don't see things like this happen again. Because I'll tell you, if no one would have thought a couple years ago someone like Frank Edelblut would be possible. No one thought, a Tea Party ideologue would be in charge of public education, someone with no experience whatsoever. Don't think that won't happen with Health and Human Services.
Yes.
Don't think that they won't try to put a privatizer in to come after your earned entitlements, to come after your Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Don't think it's happened. It just happened with Frank Edelblut in education. Don't think Governor Sununu and 3 executive counselors won't try to do it to your health care. They will. That is by far the biggest government agency in our state, and they will come after it. So having those 3 advocates for public education, for affordable, accessible health care, I think for Planned Parenthood, is monumentally important. And I know the Executive Council doesn't get the attention that Governor or Congress does, but when you're talking about 5 people who make huge decisions, and so 3 people are going to make those, 3 out of those 5 can essentially make these monumental decisions on everything from education to healthcare to transportation. It's really incredibly important that people actually understand who their executive counselor is, what he or she stands for, and what they're going to do.
I totally share that fire that brought you to this candidacy. As a matter of fact, as a freshman state rep in this last term, one of the first things I did was to march over to watch the Executive Council interviewing. And there were some great questions. Andy Belinsky was fantastic. Chris Pappas was fantastic. I actually became so irate that without any prepared anything and still very new to the process, someone said, is there a state rep prepared to speak? The word prepared never crossed my mind. And so I just brought my anger and my concern that education was going to be put into the hands. I'm sure he's a fine man. I don't mean to diminish him personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as far as having background in education, I sat down and clearly told him that I have better experience than he does to bring to the table,
That's right.
having taught in Manchester for many, many
yes.
years. And again, I share the passion that you bring for understanding the locality of Manchester and knowing who we are, because we are such a small state that knowing who your constituents are as closely as we can in New Hampshire is absolutely fantastic. So I appreciate that. Heidi, you had a question.
Not sure which one it was.
Anything.
Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
So you're for that, right?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of Planned Parenthood. As I briefly alluded to, when I was in law school, one of my professors worked for Planned Parenthood, and she knew I had just worked coming into law school as an organizer for Jean Shaheen, and she said, hey, look, there's about to be this cool new initiative that is going to happen here in Planned Parenthood of New Hampshire, and it involves organizing, and I'd like you to be a part of it. And so I decided to do. I did it, and it was a great experience. I mean, on sort of a theoretical or political level, I supported Planned Parenthood. I went to work for them, but when you are there, when you're a part of it, when you're going into the clinics, when you're hearing the stories of its patients and of its supporters, people's deeply personal stories, it impacted me in a way that to this day I remember that experience very, very clearly. So to me, Planned Parenthood stands for. It hurts a little bit to see it politicized to the extent that it is, because there are partisan politicians who are just going to scream abortion, and that's all that they're going to do. But in reality, what people don't realize is federal law prohibits taxpayer money from funding abortion. Federal law. It's been like that a long, long time. The funding that goes through the Executive Council that goes to Planned Parenthood does not fund abortion. It funds everything from cancer screenings to well woman exams, STDs, birth control, things that 80% of people can agree on, that are just that's just smart public health policy. That these are the services Planned Parenthood also provides. And not only that, but Planned Parenthood, it serves communities that otherwise might not be served. Here, particularly here in Manchester, people who live at the poverty level, people who are immigrants and refugees, people who, by the way, are, their citizenship status might make them too scared to go to the hospital, that they're afraid that they might be taken away from their families, but they know they're safe at Planned Parenthood. All of these people, tens of thousands of people, rely on Planned Parenthood for critical health care services. So to me, to see Planned Parenthood used on a partisan basis as just people screaming abortion is just a sad commentary on political discourse. To me, I know what Planned Parenthood is. I've worked for them. And what I want to see is advocates of smart public health, of affordable, accessible health care. That's what Planned Parenthood is, and that's what we need to do much, much more of in this state. I mean, I personally believe health care should be a right, not a privilege. That's what I hope to see in my lifetime. If I can be a part of that on the Executive Council, I want to be a part of that.
So now that we've gotten into one of the topics that's come out of the recent Executive Council, let me back you up a little bit. I'd like you to, first of all, to tell us where you're running,
Yep.
What localities will be able to
Sure.
vote for you or not vote for you, whichever the case may be, and what on earth is the Executive Council?
Sure.
Not every
Yeah.
state has that kind of
Oh, no,
configuration
no,
in
it's-
government, and I'm sure there are people who are not quite sure as to what the
Sure.
Executive Council does.
Sure.
So a couple of questions there.
Process oriented, the Executive Council is essentially a five-member board of directors for the state of New Hampshire. It's part of the executive branch. The governor reports to the Executive Council. The governor is almost like a CEO or a chairman, and the council is like a five-member board of directors. And what they do is they vote on all state contracts that are of the value of $10,000 or more. So that's virtually every
Right.
state contract. And nominations, the governor's nominations to state cabinet positions, state agencies, and the judiciary. So in most states, a lot of that gets done either, for example, contracts just by the governor, or judicial nominations, cabinet appointments by the legislature. In New Hampshire, we have this quasi five-member body. It kind of acts legislative at times, even though it's executive. It does executive things too, that makes these really important decisions. So that's what the Executive Council is. So those five people make incredibly important decisions. It's in many ways. Each one of their votes is of tremendous impact if you live in the state of New Hampshire. In terms of this district, District 4, it's been served the past 3 terms by Chris Pappas. Very well, I might say.
Agreed.
Chris, I talked with him about getting into this, and he gave me some great advice, because I said, look, at first, before I get into anything else, can I do this job? I was like, because if I can't, then I'm not going to, put in all this time away from my family. But he said, Garth, yeah, you can do it, because you're going to be basically voting on what you did as an alderman. You're still voting on nominations to, cabinet positions. You're still voting on state contracts. It's just from the city level to the state level. So it's going to be more of it. And the nice thing is I don't have to worry about the state budget. I'll leave that to you guys.
Right, we do that.
Exactly. You'll do that.
That's
That's right.
our little bailiwick, if you
right.
wish.
And the district is the city of Manchester.
Okay.
Any community contiguous to Manchester, so Bedford, Londonderry, Goffstown, Hooksett, Auburn, Candia and Deerfield, then it sort of runs up north into sort of the southern and eastern Concord suburbs. Towns like Loudon, Epsom, Chichester, Allenstown, and all the way out into Barrington and Lee. But a total of 19 communities, so city of Manchester and 18 towns.
Are you opposed in the primary?
I am. Yes, there's primaries on both sides actually. A primary for me and a Republican primary. A new candidate, first-time candidate, Gray Chinawith, who's a corporate executive in the mill yard, running for the first time, and on the Republican side, former state rep Jane Cormier, and a very familiar face in Manchester, Ted Gassis. So it'll be one of the four of us.
So you're telling us that your local experience is a major thing. I think you've neglected to say that your business background is incredibly important. Do you
Well,
want to
thank you.
elaborate there?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think one of the things that distinguishes me in this race is that our campaign it's a grassroots campaign. It really is. That's how I met my wife on the Obama campaign. Grassroots organizing. I've worked as an organizer twice in my life. Jean Shaheen, Planned Parenthood, and did a lot of work on the Obama campaign. I met my wife there, and what really, I guess, sort of happened was sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit here. But
Well, you segued into your wife, and that
yeah,
is
yeah, well, exactly. Who's everything? Exactly. But the race, to me, having a grassroots campaign is important to me. And I think it's important to other people too. But I'm proud of the fact we're not taking in corporate money. Only one of the four who's not. We're the only candidate, only campaign. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to be held accountable by people. Having that 6 years of representing the east side of Manchester, hardworking middle class families, that's who I want to be accountable to. Bottom line, that's who I want. Those are going to be the people who I want to be a champion for, be an advocate. And it's not that I'm anti-business, as you said. I'm a small business attorney. I teach business law. One it gives me great pleasure to start businesses and help them thrive and grow. But I don't believe businesses or corporations are people. I just don't believe that. The law, Citizens United may say that. I don't believe on a practical level that's the case. So I'm running a people first campaign, grassroots campaign, and I think it's going really well. There's no way to know, of course, until the votes are cast.
September 11th will be your
September
first
11th.
Right.
opportunity to do
That will
that.
be.
Yes.
Yes. But I'm excited. We're obviously 5 weeks out, 5 weeks today, I think.
Just about, probably, yeah.
And so I'm excited. It's been a lot of hard work. A lot of time away from the family.
And with a new baby in the household on top of
Yeah.
everything, yeah.
I married Wonder Woman. What do you want me to say? She's keeping everything going at the home front. I was at the Bookmobile yesterday at
Yeah.
Livingston Park,
We
this
saw that.
Manchester
Yes.
Bookmobile, and I loved it because it's an opportunity to read to children, and that is the highlight of my day every day. It's not campaigning, it's
Right.
not work. It's I either have a campaign event or I'm dialing for contributions, and I race home so that I can read a story to Heath and Bo. That's the highlight of my day. And then after that, the rest of the day is just, okay, I need to get some sleep.
And I think that's why bringing up like SB 193
Yeah.
really cuts to the heart of who we are, because it
Yeah.
is about kids, it is about our future, it is about our public schools. And I think we're both champions of the good things,
Yeah.
the really great things that are happening in our public education
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Not that we don't have challenges, I don't think anybody will
Right.
deny that.
Yeah.
But we do have an opportunity here to keep our community thriving through great public
Absolutely.
education.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really think that, I look at this picture of the mill yard behind
Yeah.
you, and what's happening in the mill yard's amazing. There's no denying it. I mean, it's incredible. The higher education and high tech. But what I do hope people in Manchester realize is that scene is not just Manchester. That you can travel
Right.
half a mile down the road, down Lake Avenue, and you're going to be in a very different Manchester. People who are struggling, who need real opportunity, who need health care, who need just a shot, any sort of opportunity. And I think that, that everyone deserves to have a government that works for them, not just the business people in the mill yard. They of course they deserve a seat at the table, but having sat at a table, in the city hall chambers making important decisions, it's about making those decisions for the people, who need that opportunity. Middle class people. We're seeing the middle class starting to dissipate so much. We need to strengthen the middle class. We need to, have empathy for people who are struggling in all of our communities right now. And it kills me to see, some of the leadership in our country right now and just the utter lack of empathy and decency and, that's happening, because I think we're just quickly learning that, so much of government is just electing just good people of just character. That goes a long, long way. It really does.
Do you have a thought that you want to share over there, Heidi?
Well, I was going to go on to a different topic.
Absolutely.
Oh, please,
I think Garth's ready for anything here.
Anything.
We'll hit him with all of them.
Your thoughts on right to work?
Yeah, I could not really be more opposed to it, to be
Yes.
honest with you. I always add the, when people say right to work, I always add the for less, because, both of my parents in the union, and the NEA, both public high school teachers, and what unions do is they stick up for the rights of people. Unions are not, there is a big difference between a union and a corporation, in my opinion. A union's not about profits or making money. It's about fairness, for the people who do work. And that's, again, that's dissipating in this country too. We're losing that. So when we talk about right to work for less, I view that as just an attack right on the middle class, on not just organized labor, but on the middle class.
My son worked at Stop and Shop until they left the state.
Yeah.
And he was asked to join the union. And of course we said yes.
Yeah.
And he benefited greatly
Yeah.
from that. My father-in-law worked for Anheuser-Busch, and he
Yeah.
was in the union there.
Yeah.
Gary's cousin, Michael Roach, was the union.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Of course.
and
yeah. Legendary union
it's-
leader
it's
in this.
all union in
yeah,
our family,
Yeah,
so-
yeah. And I can say I'm one of the things I'm just very proud of in this campaign is not only just our grassroots campaign, but is the support we're getting from the labor community. I really was really proud as an alderman to stand with firefighters and
Right.
policemen and our teachers, our public works employees, all of them, because what people look, things like innovation and efficiency are important, but at the end of the day, government is the only real thing we all have in common. And what is government? But it is work that is done by people on behalf of us all. So the streets don't police themselves. There's an officer in those patrol cars. There's firefighters on that apparatus. There's teachers in those classrooms. There are guys paving and plowing your roads. It's all done by people. And so to me, having the support, as you said, of seeing the impact that unions have, I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to be endorsed by 9 labor unions. And we have some other good announcements
great.
coming out in that
Excellent.
regard. I think that at the end of the day, just, standing with people, standing with working people, staying with the middle class, and being an advocate for those with less is, I think that's the job of any public servant.
And I think Manchester's a perfect example with our backdrop here of the mill yard. You can go into some of those buildings and see some of the hash marks and the scarred
Yeah.
scarred floors as these people went through awful kinds of labor situations until they were unionized.
That's right.
And I think it's a perfect, it's part of our legacy
Yeah.
to
Look,
protect the working man.
What brought me to Manchester was my great-grandparents immigrated to work in those mills.
My grandparents did as
Yeah.
well, and my dad was instrumental in unionizing the Wampak mills.
Oh, wow.
That's how old I am, but we won't go there.
That's great, though. Yeah, that's great.
And I just want to make sure that, would you clarify the term right to work? Because some people, I think,
Yeah,
They see that
it's a
differently.
misnomer.
It is.
It
Could
is.
you
Yeah,
clarify
that's
that
why
for
I
us,
always add
please?
the
Yeah.
for less.
Yeah.
You know, so Governor Sununu always claims, look, there's these big employers out there, you know, that are going to employ tens of thousands of people. If only, you know, unions wouldn't deduct from. So what unions do is they collectively bargain. They bargain on on behalf of the rights of all workers, whether they're in the union or not. So what happens is, because everyone benefits from that collective bargaining, everyone pays a share, you know, whatever that percentage might be. So the war on labor is about saying, well, look, if you're not in the union, you shouldn't have to pay, even though you get the benefits of it. But, you know, right to work for less proponents like Governor Sununu or 3 executive counselors, you know, they claim that these big employers are going to move into New Hampshire. Well, we just had the Janus decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, which essentially makes the entire country right to work, at least on the municipal, you know, public employee level. Have we seen in any way any sort of huge change in the New Hampshire employment landscape? Have we seen major employers say, we need to bring in thousands of new workers now that, you know, there's right to work for less, you know, in New Hampshire and elsewhere? I mean, to me, the whole concept is laughable. Just I couldn't be more opposed to it. I think it's just a facade for the war on working people.
And I just wanted to be sure that everybody kind of understood what we're talking about here, because as you said, I mean, that was one of the first fights this term in the
Yeah.
legislature, and we had a different result that the Janus decision has now
Yeah.
brought to us. I'm on the Commerce Committee. I serve on the Commerce and Consumer Affairs Committee. And business was coming to us, and their concern was not necessarily any of that.
Yeah.
Their concern was they wanted an educated workforce.
That's right.
That's really what they're looking at.
Absolutely.
So could you address a little bit about that, too? Because we now
Yeah.
have an aging population.
Yeah.
Some millennials are coming in. Great things are happening here. But
Yeah.
where do you see New Hampshire going in terms of building our workforce, in terms of building our educated population?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, not only do I view education just as a moral issue and as an issue of opportunity, but look, there are very powerful economic arguments to make to say we need to invest in education. And you're right, that's what the business community is saying. That is absolutely what
They're not staying. If we give them tax breaks or whatever, if they can't sustain
Yeah.
their workforce, then
Yeah,
why
look,
would
I
they
mean,
stay?
Tax breaks are one thing.
Right.
Tax breaks are, a very small piece of the puzzle to a lot of businesses. What they want is, we need good workers so that we can make profits. So I think to address how to make New Hampshire maybe a little younger, a little more vibrant,
Or just additionally
yeah,
strong.
yeah. I mean, look, I can tell you from my own experience. We're a middle class family. If there was paid family medical leave, that would be impacting my life right now. Kate wouldn't have to worry about going back to work in a couple weeks.
Right.
She might be able to have another month or so off, and we wouldn't be struggling to make ends meet. Like that matters to people in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. That's a game changer. Paid family medical leave, that would do wonders. Having access to more affordable universal daycare, childcare services, pre-K services, that would change lives. That would do so much for young families to say, I want to be here. One of the things that I was talking with a union official the other day about was, look at what's happening in Massachusetts. Massachusetts economy is red hot. You drive into Boston, there's cranes everywhere. They are building. They have more jobs than they know what to do with. But what else does Massachusetts have? Massachusetts is a very progressive state. They are all about investing in education. They are all about having strong unions because they know that education leads to opportunity. And they know that a unionized workforce benefits everybody. So you see what's happening there and you say, okay, wow, there's no reason we can't do that here. And in fact, we should be doing more of it. here in Manchester, Southern New Hampshire, we are totally integrated into that metropolitan Boston economy. That is what we would be considered. And so what we really need to start enacting policies that are pro-family. And, pro-family policies, is not just about all these, sort of traditional right-wing talking points. Pro-family policies are paid family and medical leave, child care tax credits, giving schools, challenge schools like here in Manchester, just, the necessities, and then making, a 4-year college degree or some sort of trade or a community college degree, making that as every bit accessible as a K through 12 education is
It's
today.
a travesty, the debt that some of our
yeah.
young people come out with.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, I'm going to be paying off debt the rest of
Sure.
my life.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it's-
my student loans are a major part of our, and my wife's, they're
Right.
big part of our budget.
helpful.
Debt, just because we wanted to be educated.
Right, and you wanted to have a good family life and,
Yeah.
and pay it forward for your children.
right, that's
and yet the consequences
Yeah.
financially are dastardly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
look, there's if you're really, if you have family values, it's about doing things to make the lives of people with families just maybe a little bit easier, a little less hard, And so there's a lot of things we can do, not just the business community, but our state government needs to start taking some real leadership and not just say we're pro-family, but actually put in, enact policies that,
Yep.
aren't just going to talk the talk, but are going to walk the walk.
Right, that family medical leave insurance
Yeah.
looked as though it was poised to go through, at
Yeah.
least at some measure.
Yeah.
And it failed at the last minute. So
did.
I think you're absolutely right. If we're going to sustain our status as one of the great states of the 50 states,
Yeah.
absolutely we have to do
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, look, the quality of life here is great.
It's
It's amazing. It's a great. I can't even. It's hard for me to fathom raising a family elsewhere. The quality of life here is so amazing, but things change. Things change over time, and if we're not keeping up with the times, then guess
Right.
what? Young families
They're gonna
like
go.
mine might just say, "Well, look, I'll make more money and have a better quality of life in Boston.
Right.
I'll move 30 miles away and I'll be doing a lot better." We can't afford to have
No.
that happen here.
And none of us wants to believe that will be the case, so we have to continue to
Right.
work to make sure that is not the case.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just keep moving the ball forward. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Boston, what's your thoughts on the rails?
Yeah. To me, it's strange we don't have commuter rail to Boston. I served as an alderman. I served as chair of the city's economic development committee, and the business community, young families, all the time are always talking to me about Manchester needs rail. We need commuter rail to Boston, and I was looking at what was happening in Nashua. Nashua was really being very vocal, a great proponent of saying we want rail here, and yet here in Manchester, crickets.
Yeah.
Just crickets. So I started having, for a year, I had monthly hearings on commuter rail, bringing commuter rail from Boston to Manchester. I'll tell you a couple really interesting things I learned. Number one, and I'll talk about the economic development second, but number one, people don't talk enough about the quality of life benefits. I mean, we're talking about several thousand people who either live in New Hampshire and work in Boston, or live in Boston, work in New Hampshire, whose daily lives are going to be changed significantly, who aren't going to be spending, 3 to 4 hours a day in a traffic jam, that are going to be able to hop on a train, do some work, or catch up on some sleep, whatever it might be. That's going to be for working families. That's important. So the quality of life benefits of rail are great, and secondly, there's incredible opportunity for public-private partnerships here. Real estate developers in Manchester came to the city and said, "We'll build the stations. Don't even worry about spending money on that. We'll build them." And you want to know why that they're willing to build them is because of the economic development benefits. And this was a conservative study, but this study showed that if you lived within 1 square mile of a commuter rail stop. So if you lived within 1 square mile of the airport or 1 square mile of the mill yard, the value of your property will go up 20%.
Yeah, I've heard that. Isn't that incredible?
20%. Imagine whatever your house is worth now. Let's say, 200,000. Imagine just in the blink of an eye, it's worth 220. For nothing's changed except for the fact that there's now a train stop.
Right.
That and by the way, and if you live within 2 square miles of either one of the airport or mill yard stops, the value of your house is still going up 10%. So by the way, that's most of the city of Manchester.
Absolutely, yes.
So that's huge for families.
Yes.
That will be huge. Imagine having the value of your home all of a sudden go up double digits and you didn't have to do anything. It's just because of the fact that commuter rail provides real economic benefits to the business community, by the way. So not only does the business community benefit, so do families, so do homeowners. That's amazing to me. As I said, I'm kind of perplexed that we don't, my parents talk about hopping on the train station in Manchester and going to Boston when they were young.
So what's the problem? Why don't we move forward with this? Why is there such pushback, in your opinion? Is it the cost? Is it an economic?
I think it's just ideology.
Really?
I really do. I think it's the fact that that there are people who strongly believe that we shouldn't be subsidizing public transportation. Or they'll say, well, there's buses or there's a car, there's other options. Well,
There's cars, but the cars are
yeah,
miles and miles on the highway.
exactly, exactly. And
It's just-
it's issues. They bring up points that try to divert from the issue at hand. Look, of course, public transportation is subsidized. Every sort of whatever government might do is subsidized by us, the people. Whether that's our education, whether it's our healthcare, whether it's our transportation. I'd much rather be investing in those things than giving people of means more tax benefit, more tax cuts. People who don't need more, people who already have a lot. By the way, that's what tax cuts are. It's subsidies for them. So it's a question of, what do you want to invest in? Do you want to invest in more for people who already have more, or do you want to invest in your community? And by the way, in all these people who the quality of life is going to change, the businesses who are going to see their, profits thrive, the homeowners who are going to see the values of their home go up. I mean, there's so many reasons to do it, and we're one step away. We're one step away.
And I think if we have some changes in the legislature and some changes up in Concord, then maybe the eventuality will get even closer and closer by the day. So
Exactly.
I'm really hopeful that
I really hope so.
that can
Boy.
really happen. Now, am I correct? When you're on the executive council, you do plan for the 10-year transportation
Yes,
plan?
that's right. So
And-
rail was part of that.
One cog of that. I
Yeah,
guess
it
cog
was.
is the wrong word.
Yeah, no, well, it's
Okay.
an apt one.
All right.
It was, and then the legislature took it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, one Republican ended up supporting it on the council. I think it was Russ Prescott.
Okay, I'm
and
not
Chris
sure who it
Pappas,
was, yeah.
of course, and Andy Valinsky. But yeah, it was included in the initial plan. But the legislature does have the final authority. But yeah, it comes from that the process starts with the governor and the council. Yeah, and of course that when it started, Governor Sununu was in favor of his pipe dream that maybe somehow Amazon might come to Londonderry,
Right.
which was
Right.
I don't know what he was thinking, but so he initially was like, okay, let's do it. Then all of a sudden, Amazon says, well, you're not even in our top 50,
Right.
and okay, well, I don't want rail anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, talk about subsidies. Well, you were willing to, have commuter rail just because of one major corporation. I mean, that's, wow, you want to talk about corporate welfare. I mean,
I'm going to segue a little bit from the role of the executive counselor for a moment and come to a topic that I'd just like to hear your thoughts on because it is so critically important to many of us in Manchester, but across the country, the opioid crisis and the drug crisis that our country is facing that is just, it's decimating our young people, as we
Yeah.
know. It's causing problems with our health system. Will you share any thoughts on where you think we need to go in order to alleviate that, to bring us right on track again?
I mean, I can tell you there is no easy answer. You know, that's I think the difficult thing about this is that this isn't just a public health problem. It's not just a public safety problem. It's not just a government problem or a family problem. It's everything. You know, there's so much of it is interconnected. Science, you know, the neurology, the, you know, body chemistry of, you know, how people who are addicted to opioids, how it changes. I mean, there's so much that we need to do. You know, I look. Of course, I can tell you. You know, as you know, a 6-year alderman, of course I've dealt with this issue. You know, and it's devastating. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone probably in Manchester who doesn't know someone whose life has been, you know, adversely impacted by this. And I will say, I think on the local level, we're doing a lot.
I believe we
are.
are.
On the local
I agree.
level, I really think Manchester should be. I'm not saying there's not always more to do. Of course there is, but I do think the people of Manchester should be proud about what's being done right now. You know, I don't think it's an accident that Manchester is being recognized as a leader in this.
Oh, we're absolutely on the forefront. I agree.
yeah.
But every life lost is just
Yeah.
the wrong thing to have happen.
Yeah,
It doesn't move us
yeah.
forward at all,
Yeah.
even for one young
Yeah.
life or one older life.
Yeah, and so, you know, look, when you want to serve in office, one of the things that's just going to be so important is at the local level, the state level, and the federal level, is that there's communication, that ideas are being shared, and that real policy initiatives are being put forward at every level. You know, at the local level, I think, as I said, I think we're doing a lot.
Right.
The state level, finally, there's sort of now an acknowledgement, okay, we need to do more anyway. And at the federal level, I mean, we need to do a lot more. You know, I mean, we can't just leave communities like ours here in Manchester just out on our own. You know, because that, you know, we don't have the resources to, you know, solve this by ourselves. You
Yes.
know, we need people at the federal and state level to step up. You know, and that's why I think it's also important to elect people that are going to be advocates, you know, for our communities, that are going to say, hey, look, don't forget about what's happening in Manchester. You know, don't think that somehow, you know, the fact that you might not live in Manchester or Nashua or any community impacted by this, that just because opioids aren't an issue in your community doesn't mean it's not impacting people you know. It absolutely is.
And you really bring up a very valid point, or at least something that I agree is a very valid point, that need to work together on all levels,
Yeah.
from state to federal and to the local level as well, but even across party lines,
Yeah.
even just sitting next to your colleague at the executive council meetings, making sure that you are networking on behalf of everybody,
Yeah.
of all people.
And by the way, I'm really glad you used the term colleagues. I've you know, I've served with, you know, Democratic and Republican aldermen, and I considered all of them my colleagues. You know, of course, there are several issues I might disagree with one alderman on or another, but at the end of the day, you know, Ed Osborne, the late Ed Osborne
Yes.
from Ward 5, gave me
Yes.
the best piece of advice as a public servant I ever got. And it was on the day I was first inaugurated. I went up to him and I said, Alderman Osborne, you've served a long time. You know, what would be the one thing you would tell a brand new alderman, you know, about serving? And he goes, kid, just vote so you can go to sleep at night. And that's what it is. It's just trying to do the right thing each and every time.
Yep.
You know, so that when you go home, you say, maybe I won, maybe I lost on a vote, but I tried. And you know, I tried to do the right thing. And you just have to have faith that the politics takes care of itself.
And you brought up a level of collegiality that I left out, that idea of the young and the older. I mean, I'm working with young candidates. Heidi and I are both working with young candidates who are energizing us, energizing me particularly, bringing new ideas. And I think
It's
the
the
smallness
best.
of our state allows for that really to be a major factor. And I hope that regardless of how things go politically for any candidate,
Yeah.
that we remember that we're all in this together, and that if we support each other,
Oh, yeah.
we won't solve all the problems, we know that, but at least we can
Exactly.
take a chance at getting some of them solved.
Exactly.
We're running out of time. Heidi, do you have
Yes.
something important on your list that you want to get to before we?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just
Then-
wanted to say thank you for being alderman for
course.
Ward 6.
Aw.
For my son
Yeah,
lives there, and
Absolutely. Jeff's a
we
great, great
appreciated
guy. Got a
everything
great son.
that you've done.
Of course, it was an honor. I
Yes.
loved it. I really did. I mean, it was
Yes.
it was hard work, and there were absolutely times where you're saying, "Why am I doing this?" But
I certainly understand that.
I've, as I said, I've had a couple years, to be with my family. We've moved and added another one to our clan, and you really realize at the end of the day how important it is to just, as Barack Obama said, be the change you want to see in the world. To me, whether I win a political campaign or lose it, having that example, I think, for young people is so important. I hope my boys at least get that.
Well, I think your family, your family is totally an example of that kind of thing, because I remember one day meeting your wife at the State House at lunch, and she was up there advocating for, who was she working for?
Alzheimer's, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's who she works for.
And so we're all taking the time to do things. Let me close off with one esoteric question that you can't answer in 1 minute. What do you think is the future of our state, and how can you be part of that future?
As I said, to me, the most important thing we can do is just focus on strengthening and expanding the middle class. And that means I believe in a government that works from the bottom up and not from the top down. I don't believe that those with the most power and the most means need more. I think that we need to focus on, those who are truly in need, what we can do as just fellow citizens to just make their lives a little less hard. And same for the middle class, is just, we really need some of those policies we were just talking about: paid family medical leave, investing in education, child care, senior services. So many of these things are just the good and decent thing to do. And not only that, but it changes people's lives for the better. And I think government can be a force for good. One of my favorite sayings is, we deserve a government as good as our people.
I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
I want to thank Garth Corriveau, candidate for for Executive Council, for being with us today. My co-host Heidi Hamer, who is also running for re-election in Ward
Absolutely.
10, not re-election,
No.
first-time election
Yes.
in Ward 10 as a state rep, and of course I am an
Vote for
incumbent
Connie,
in Ward
Heidi,
10, 11,
and
12. Yeah. Anyway, it's been a great pleasure to have you
you.
here today and
Thank
to
you.
share
Thank
some
you.
of these ideas. Thank you
Yeah,
very
thank
much.
you.
Ward 13 will be back, I believe, with an interesting group of young students next time. Please stay tuned for that as it plays out. Have a good night, Manchester.